Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good. Welcome to all of you joining our live stream of our weekly satsang. Sitting here with a number of local students. We'll be, as we've done before, we'll be taking questions both from our local students and from online students. There are many more online students than local students, so I think the proportion will be heavily weighted towards the online students, but we will take local questions as well. And we'll begin here. So this question is from Bennett, who lives in Melbourne. Nice. Bennett says, I understand that our true nature is eternal, unchanging consciousness. Good. But can we consider jiva as our reality at vyavaharika satta level, considering that jiva can be eternal? It might relate with duality concept, jivatma, paramatma, little technical language. But the, whoa. Ah. That doesn't work. There we go. I apologize to our online viewers who couldn't hear a thing of what I was just saying. I had neglected to turn on my microphone. My apologies. Usually problems with technology. Everyone complains about, oh, my computer's not working, this isn't working. 99% of the time, it's user error, as it was in this case as well. So welcome to our satsang. We'll be taking questions both from our local students and from online students. Our first question comes from Bennett, who lives in Melbourne, Australia. He asks about Satchitananda Atma, our true nature, which is eternal and unchanging consciousness. But can we consider jiva as our reality at the vyavaharika satta level, which means empirical reality? So we say that my true nature is Satchitananda Atma. Can we say that this body and mind is me at a worldly level? In fact, if you don't say this body and mind is me at a worldly level, there's a problem. The joke you may have heard me give before is if you meet someone for the first time and you say, hello, I am Satchitananda Atma, that's not very helpful. So yes, we understand that at a level of truth, absolute truth, you are in essence unchanging consciousness, Satchitananda Atma. But at a worldly level, we take things empirically and naturally. There's no need. Anything that's really unnatural sticks out. And an example I think I've given before is a famous saint in North India who was believed to be really enlightened, if I can say really enlightened at all. But this saint had an interesting habit of saying, this is hungry, this is tired, this would like a cup of tea. Now, to me, that strikes me as unnecessary. If you really understand that you are Satchitananda Atma, and you really understand that this body and mind exist at a worldly level, where is the necessity to adopt this awkward language? So, if you meet me, I will say, my name is Swami Tadatmananda. I'll tell you that, knowing full well that in a way I'm lying to you in the sense that my true nature is indeed Satchitananda Atma. Next question from Sandra. Sandra, who lives in Netherlands. Nice. Sandra asks, is there a difference between rebirth and reincarnation? We use the words interchangeably. In Sanskrit, punarjanma would be the term. And, if so, what are the differences? There are no difference. But interesting point she makes here. If only an enlightened person can reincarnate without the veil of ignorance. Wait a minute. An enlightened being doesn't reincarnate with or without the veil of ignorance. This might be some confusion with the Buddhist tradition, in particular the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. Actually, not just the Tibetan Buddhists. They have a belief in what they call bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is someone who gains enlightenment in one life, but then vows to be reborn again and again for the sake of coming back and helping all beings, helping all sentient beings. It's a lovely teaching. It's a matter of belief. We can't prove it. We can't disprove it. But it's a teaching that's found in Buddhist traditions. It's not present in the Hindu tradition anywhere. So after one becomes enlightened, there is no further incarnation. By the way, let me just there are a number of, if you have any confusion about reincarnation and who is it that transmigrates, there are a number of videos in a playlist called Doctrine of Karma. Go to my YouTube channel, find that playlist, Doctrine of Karma, and there's one video especially on who reincarnates. Those videos might be very helpful. This question from Arju. Arju lives in India. He asks, how does it start in the first place? What is it that binds me to the faculties of my body and mind and experiences? How does all this happen in the first place? This is a topic that's often asked. It's a topic based on a misconception that there was a first place. We ask, why did God create the world in the first place? Why did I get incarnated into any form in the first place? The problem is that there was no first birth. Birth is cyclic. There was no first universe. The universe is cyclic. It would take quite a while to explain the logic behind that. The shortcut is a video which is called, I think, Why Did God Create the World in the First Place? So a video, maybe it's a year old, and it goes through the logic behind the concept of infinity. We have to learn how to grasp this concept of infinity. That particular video deals with it quite nicely. Arju, I think you'll find your question answered in that video. Next question from Stefano. Stefano lives in Spain. Nice. He asks, here we go. I clearly understand the teachings which say that my true nature is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat, existence, Chit, pure consciousness, Ananda, infinite, complete, limitless. And thank you, Stefano, for defining Ananda correctly. This is a big mistake many, many people make when they translate Ananda as bliss. Bliss is an experience. It's an experience that comes and goes. Satchitananda is not an experience, it's you. So Ananda does not mean experience. Stefano correctly says Ananda means that the existent consciousness that I am is infinite, complete, limitless, which is a correct understanding. And he says this is completely clear, 100% clear. But I cannot feel or experience it. Aha! Stefano has fallen into the trap that almost all students of Vedanta fall into at some point in time. And my own guru used to make a joke out of it. He says, people would ask him, Swamiji, I know that I am Brahman, but how to experience it? He got asked that question again and again and again and again. And the problem is that we're talking about you, the truth of who you are, your essential nature as unborn, uncreated, limitless consciousness. That consciousness allows you to experience the world around you. That consciousness enables you to know what's happening in your mind at any point in time. And look at the problem. You want to experience that which is responsible for experience. There's a problem here. It's like the sun shines, and then I bring out a flashlight and I want to see the sun with this flashlight. I shine the flashlight at the sun because I want to really experience the sun. Well, you see how unnecessary it is. The sun is already shining. It is self-shining. That self-shining sun does not need to be revealed, known, or experienced through any other means. I don't need the light of a flashlight to experience the light of the sun. In the same way, we often metaphorically speak of the light of consciousness. The light of consciousness is self-revealing, self-effulgent, they use that term. You don't need to experience it. It's already present in your experience right now. You're watching this video, Stefano, I presume. Either you're watching it live or you're watching it after the fact, recording. This experience that you're having right now, you're conscious of this experience. You're conscious of me on your screen, whatever you're watching, and you're aware of my presence on the screen because of consciousness. Consciousness lies behind all experience. Consciousness is you, the experiencer. Anything, and we've given this language before, it's important, anything experienced is not you, the experiencer. This will answer your question. Anything that you experience, even in meditation, is something happening in your mind that is known to you, the experiencer. Consciousness belongs to the experiencer. Consciousness does not belong to the experienced. Okay, we'll take one more question here, and then we'll take some local questions. I'm frowning here. Oh, that's what happened. Because all the satsang questions just went away. Little embarrassing. I'm going here and then, what happened? There is a button here that says filter by unread. You push that button And all the emails, I read all the emails before class. So all the emails you've read go away. And that's what just happened. And I started to freak out. Oh no, what happened? What happened to all these questions? All right, so I've got them back. Let's take one more. This question from Uma. Uma doesn't say where she lives. Good question. I'm basically a rational, reasonable, and logic-oriented person. I believe in karma yoga. I'm practicing purification of my mind. I'm studying Bhagavad Gita. But I'm putting the word but in. But I am unable to see any utility in prayer and other rituals. Another hard, I don't mean to make fun of anyone, but this actually describes me decades ago. Hard-headed Vedantin. Hard-headed means all head and no heart. That's what I mean by hard-headed. I am unable to see any utility in prayer and other rituals, but a significant portion of the Indian population are engaged in prayer and ritual. I ask my elders, they say it's our tradition. In any case, I find it totally irrelevant in today's world, prayer and rituals. To conclude that rituals are irrelevant, perhaps there's no problem if you conclude that that rituals are irrelevant. But bear in mind that because it's irrelevant for you, doesn't mean it's irrelevant for others. For me, eating meat is irrelevant. It's not even a possibility. But I recognize the fact for other people, that's what they eat. So just because something is irrelevant for me doesn't mean it's irrelevant for others. Just because rituals might be irrelevant for you doesn't mean they're irrelevant for others. Prayer is another matter. Now, by prayer, if what you mean is reciting Vedic verses, yes, that could also be irrelevant for you, could be highly relevant for others, but there's something missing here. And this is where we come back to that hard-headed Vedantin bit, and which describes me as a young man. And the problem with that is, without some kind of prayer or devotional life, without some kind of relationship with Ishvara, God of the cosmos, in the complete, utter absence of any kind of prayer or any kind of relationship with Ishvara, there's a problem. There's a big problem. And it was a big problem for me. So I had rejected the religion of my childhood, so I had to develop a new way of relating to Ishvara. And fortunately, the teachings of Vedanta provide a really solid basis for developing that relationship. And it turns out that some form of prayer, devotional practice, doesn't mean formal like puja or anything, but some kind of prayerful relationship with the God of the universe is extremely helpful. And to call it irrelevant, perhaps, would be a mistake. I think relevant to all seekers of liberation, relevant for all followers of Advaita Vedanta. But starting off in such a rational place, and I think, here we go, Uma. I think Uma and I share this in common when I was a young man, and that is being so rational, reasonable, and logical that there's no place in your head and heart for any kind of prayer, that's a problem. And that can be overcome. There's a great value in developing some kind of prayerful devotional practice. And just some practical advice here. There's a topic that I really feel strongly about. A video with the title, Finding God Without Faith. I highly recommend that particular video because in Advaita Vedanta, and here's, let me speak really to the point. Prayer doesn't depend on blind faith, which is rejected by Uma, by me, and by a great number of people. There's no place for a rational person. Blind faith is not an option. Even today, I have zero blind faith. I don't believe in anything without a rational basis. So, turns out that the way Advaita Vedanta presents Ishvara is as not based on blind faith. It's not dogmatic. It's not based on any kind of belief. It's reasonable. So that video, Finding God Without Faith, introduces Ishvara and the prayer in general in a manner that doesn't depend on blind faith and may be suitable for someone like Uma, who is very rational and logical. Okay, shall we take, are there any questions here? There might not be. Any questions? Okay, then we'll continue here with Amit. Amit, I'm just delighted. These questions are wonderful. I've been enjoying this so much. Amit lives in India. He asks, I have a relative who goes regularly goes to temples and prays to God. I asked her to consider studying Vedanta. Can I suggest that might not be the best idea? Anyway, but she responded, she asks me she says that she wants to keep things simple, not to be complicated. She says her connection to God and the universe is more important for her happiness. Amit goes on to say, I see people from ISKCON, the Hare Krishna group, they singing and dancing and in rapture. So Amit asks, is my connection to God more important at the end of the day, however it happens? Many people meditate their entire lives and study scriptures, but they do not seem to be ecstatic. Good questions, really good questions. First of all, with regard to your relative who goes to the temple regularly, if somebody has a rewarding religious and spiritual life, if it's working for them, they probably don't need Vedanta. Honestly, they probably don't need Vedanta. And the teachings of Vedanta are not really made for everyone anyway. So, and sometimes recommending Vedanta is not appropriate if somebody already has a strong practice and they're finding peace and contentment through that practice, then that's fine. The second question is more challenging. When we see people engaged in devotional practices and meditational practices, and they enjoy this ecstasy, and then you see the scholar reading all these serious Sanskrit books. And then if you ask this person a question, yeah, don't bother me, you go back. Just, where's the ecstasy in that? Well, first of all, that person who's studying the scripture, in my view, is not an Advaita Vedantin. They're a scholar. And scholars can be irritable, and scholars are whoever they are. An Advaita Vedantin is not one who studies scriptures, one who is engaged in self-inquiry. Vedanta, after all, is a method of self-inquiry. Self is not in the scripture. Self is here. So very scholarly people who are not in a state of ecstasy, you wouldn't be ecstatic either if you had to read all of this complicated stuff, commentaries and arguments, and goes on and on and on. Helpful, but not a source of ecstasy. Ecstasy is found looking within. How can you find it within? Well, teachings of Vedanta are certainly adequate. They lead you to discover your true nature is Satchitananda Atma, full, complete, unborn, uncreated, and to appreciate your true self as Satchitananda Atma, the so-called divine self. That appreciation leads to perfect peace and contentment. Ecstasy is something else. And there's a little problem with ecstasy. Funny to use that expression. There's a problem with ecstasy? Someone who chants, Hare Krishna, etc., they get ecstatic. Wonderful. But then their kirtan comes to an end. And they have to go home, take care of the kids, cook dinner, and all of this other stuff. What happens to that ecstasy? So that ecstasy is created through these intense practices, and wonderful. I mean, they enjoy it so much, more power to them. But the point is that an ecstatic experience produced through a devotional activity or through a meditative activity, same thing. In meditation, you can absolutely create states of ecstasy, but those conditions come to an end. Kirtan comes to an end. By the way, this is these hand symbols that they use, kartals. So this is a metaphor, a symbol for that. So the devotional activities come to an end, meditation comes to an end. Any ecstasy produced by those devotional and meditative activities comes to an end. There's actually a problem, a more serious problem, and that is if seeking ecstasy, by the way, this is not Amit's problem. This is, I think Amit is very dedicated to Vedanta, so I'm not talking about Amit. But if someone is dedicated to seeking ecstatic experiences, that's not Vedanta. In fact, it's hard even to call that spiritual. One teacher sarcastically called it spiritual materialism, because instead of seeking experiences through gourmet foods, or some people seeking it through sex and other activities, so instead of seeking ecstasy through these wonderful worldly activities, now you're seeking ecstasy through singing and dancing and meditation. You're still seeking an experience. Seeking experience is not spiritual. When I was a young man, drugs, LSD, mescaline, these were the big thing, and a lot of post-hippies were seeking ecstasy through these drugs. In fact, yes, this is a little bit of an aside. We mentioned Hare Krishna here, the ISKCON. Swami Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, came to this country in 1965, exactly at the time when all these hippies are using the drugs, enjoying the ecstasy, and then Prabhupada really drew them in by saying, you don't need drugs to gain ecstasy, you just need to do this kirtan. And so now these ex-hippies, instead of taking LSD for ecstasy, now they're chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, which is good, certainly better than taking LSD. It's good, but it's still seeking an experience. That's a problem. Experiences come and go. And to seek experience is, by definition, a worldly activity. Even if it's a spiritual experience, it's an experience. Experiences come and go. Anyway, enough said. So in Advaita Vedanta, we do not seek a transient experience as the goal. In Advaita Vedanta, we seek the discovery of one's true nature as Satchitananda Atma. That is the goal. All right. Next, from Swapna. Swapna lives in Sugar Land, Texas. I think there's a large, very large Hindu community in this, I think near Dallas, I think? I'm not, Houston, near Houston. Sugar Land is just outside of Houston. Very large, active Hindu community there. Answering one question, I said, one cannot meditate upon consciousness. Could you please elaborate on that question? What does it mean to say that you cannot meditate on consciousness? In fact, we've already seen that in a prior question, answer to a prior question. We said that there is, let me use slightly different language. A fundamental analysis of our experience is the analysis of knower and known. There's a famous text called Drik Drishya Viveka. This analysis is based on that particular text. There is a knower and a known, and the knower definitely, the knower must be different than the known. In order to have a knower-known relationship, you need two things for a relationship. So there is separation or difference between that which is known and the knower. Anything known is not the knower. I'm sorry to be a little pedantic, but it's kind of important. Anything known is different from the knower. Okay? The nature of the knower, in order to be a knower, it implies being conscious. Can you know anything if there's no consciousness? What can you know? The essence of the knower is consciousness. Or let me use simpler language. That's a little abstract. We can say consciousness belongs to the knower. Consciousness does not belong to the known. That which is known is an object. Like you know, if you're watching your screen right now, you know me as an object on the screen you're watching. I am known to you, so I am an object known by you. The point is that consciousness doesn't belong to the object on your screen. Consciousness belongs to you, the conscious being watching the object on your screen. So for this reason, consciousness cannot belong to an object known. Consciousness only belongs to the knower, to the meditator, to the conscious being. So anything known in meditation is a mental object. Mental objects are objects separate from the knower. So consciousness belongs to that knower, not to the objects known. That's true in meditation, and it's true right now. Okay. Next question is from Arvind. Arvind lives in Lucknow. He asks, if even an enlightened person does not remember their past lives, then how did the theory of past lives develop? So, who remembers their past life? And yes, there are plenty of people who claim to remember their past lives, but a claim is just that. In science, it's called anecdotal evidence, and no scientist would ever accept anecdotal evidence as proof. So we'll say it is unproved. I'm not saying these people recall past lives, but that doesn't prove the existence of past lives. Enlightened people, by a rule, don't remember their past lives because enlightened people know that memories belong to the brain and the brain does not survive death. But we know this from neuroscience. Neuroscience today shows us how memories are stored in the neurons of your brain. When those neurons are destroyed, memories don't survive death. What travels from one life to the next is not your brain, but faculties, including faculties of your mind, what we call the sukshma sharira. That subtle body contains capacities, faculties. So, for example, the faculty of memory travels from one life to the next, not particular memories. Now, it is admitted that there might be a samskara, an impression, which is said to affect the subtle body. Samskara is a mental impression, and it is held that some mental impressions are so strong that they leave a mark, so to speak. They leave an impression. We'll just stay with that word. They leave their impression on the subtle body. So when that subtle body travels from this life to the next, that subtle body brings with it the samskara, the mental impression. Sri Krishna explains in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita that someone who is deeply devoted to spiritual practice in one life, who fails to get enlightened, will probably pick up the thread in their immediately following life because of the samskara formed in that person's mind. But samskara is not a memory. Samskara is an impression. This inclination for spiritual growth is what goes with the subtle body, not particular memories. So the point here is there is no proof at all for the existence of past lives. We have scriptural evidence, and the fact that Sri Krishna is talking about future lives and implies past lives. So there is scriptural statements referring to past lives. These scriptural statements can be traced back to the ancient rishis. The ancient rishis are called Krantadarshis. Krantadarshi is one who can see beyond, one who can discover things that ordinary human beings like you and me can't discover. So apparently, these ancient rishis had some unique special capacity to understand or discover this process of reincarnation and the whole doctrine of karma. None of it. Now, even though reincarnation and past lives, even though we have scriptural evidence and we have teachings of the ancient rishis, all of that combined doesn't constitute scientific proof. Meaning that the doctrine of karma is a matter of belief. It is not an established fact, not an established truth. And as we've discussed in prior satsangs, reincarnation is not a central teaching of Vedanta. Vedanta doesn't exist to tell you that there is such a thing as past lives. Vedanta exists to tell you that your true nature is Satchitananda Atma. Vedanta does not establish reincarnation as a fact. The teachings of Vedanta presume reincarnation because that's part of the ancient Hindu culture. But that teaching is the reincarnation is never proven by Vedanta or by any other spiritual teaching, but it is a belief, and I'll just end with this it's important to end with this observation, and the observation is this. you cannot say a belief is true or false. By definition, if you could say it's true, then it's a fact. If you can say it's a false, and say it's false, then it's a known falsity. No one's going to believe in something that's false. If I tell you that my cloth is green in color, you can easily dismiss that as being false. Will you believe that this is green in color? If I tell you, you have to believe that this is green, no one's going to believe because it's demonstrably false. So anything that is true is a fact, which means not a matter of belief. Do you believe this is orange? No one believes this is orange. You know it's orange. So if it's true, it's not a matter of belief. If it's false, it's not a matter of belief. All right. What is a matter of belief is neither true or false. This a little bit of logic goes a long way here. This is really important. A belief cannot be said to be true or false. Then how shall we evaluate a belief? You can't evaluate a belief according to its validity or falseness. Then on what value, what basis can you evaluate a belief? In my opinion, you can evaluate a belief by how helpful it is. To believe in the doctrine of karma is exceedingly helpful. To believe there is our Father who lives in heaven, who judges us for our sins and will send us to eternal hell, damnation, for one little sin, is an unhelpful belief. So beliefs are neither true or false. They are distinguished by whether they're helpful or not, and without doubt, at least for me, the doctrine of karma is exceedingly helpful. Question from Martin, who lives in Germany. Nice to see how many all over, not just India and its country, but other countries as well. Martin asks, how can the law of karma and a horrible historical event like the Holocaust, 6 million Jews executed by the Nazi regime. By the way, it doesn't end at 6 million, by the way. I think the number is closer to 7 when you include the non-Jews who were killed. The Nazi regime, in addition to killing 6 million Jews, they didn't stop there. They killed 1 million more. They killed the Romanis, the gypsies. They killed homosexuals. They killed anyone with a disability. If you were born with a club foot, you were killed. So 1 million more, 6 million Jews and 1 million non-Jews. Martin's question is how to reconcile this with the doctrine of karma, that those 7 million people have such bad karma that they were destined to be killed. Absolutely not. The doctrine of karma really has to be understood properly. Doctrine of karma says what happens to you is due to karma, but not just your karma. What about the karma of others? So if some Nazi shows up at your doorstep in 1942 and takes you away to a concentration camp, it's not your karma, it's the karma of that soldier, and not just the karma of the soldier who is just doing what they're ordered to do. So here you have a Nazi regime, and then it's not just a Nazi regime, but it's a product of the culture of the time. Long story, but after World War I, the German psyche was so wounded that it led almost inexorably to the rise of this Nazi regime and the support for the Nazi regime. This is a surprising thing. That is, the vast number of people in Germany supported not all, absolutely not all, but the majority of people in Germany supported the Nazi regime because of the whole history leading up to that time, ending with, anyway, complicated history. So my guru actually responded many times to questions like these. And his response was to point to something that people don't ordinarily think about. He called it collective karma. And that is, not only can individuals have individual karma, but a group of people can have karma. Certainly your family. Families have shared karma, some kind of karma. Bringing that family together, there's some kind of karma in common there. So if a family can have karma, why not a group of people? Why not a society? Why not a culture? So we can understand that there is some kind of collective karma which led to the horrible execution of these 7 million people. So the doctrine of karma doesn't mean that whatever happens to you happens because of your actions now and your actions in prior life. That's only half of the doctrine of karma. Doctrine of karma includes actions done by other people. Karma. So this is doctrine of karma is a little more than we might think. Next, Abhijit lives in Kolkata. He asks about the So his question goes on. Let me paraphrase. Talking about the Bhagavad Gita in the context of the Mahabharata, Arjuna is told to fight because fighting is dharma, dharma defined as least harm. For Arjuna not to fight, the consequences would have been worse. So Shri Krishna tells Arjuna to fight because it will result in least harm overall. The harm caused by the war was horrible. And this is Abhijit's question. And that is that in the, later in the, picture is, the epic also includes tragic scenario towards the end of the aftermath of the war when the country is covered in burning funeral pyres and the women weep over their lost men. One of the books of the Mahabharata, one of the less studied books, is the Stri Parva. Stri means women. And the Stri Parva is filled chapter after chapter with women grieving after they're dead on the battlefield. It's pretty, it's depressing. It's really depressing. So Amit asks, Abhijit asks, so then how does this, so how is the axiom of ahimsa, the path of least damage, addressed here? Also, what is the message that the epic wants to convey? So here's the point. War has horrible consequences. No one can possibly deny that. Big wars have bigger consequences, small wars have smaller consequences. But even a small war, if we talk about the wars going on in Ukraine and Gaza and Sudan and all of this, they're small compared to World War II. Thousands of women and children are dying in these so-called small wars. They're not justified. No war has no consequences. All wars have horrible consequences. The unique circumstances in the Mahabharata described a situation in which not to fight this particular war had worse consequences than fighting it. The consequences of fighting it were terrible, but the consequences of not fighting it is even worse. And then I like his Avijit's question. What message does the great epic want to convey in that Stri Parva? Note, if you study the if you study the Mahabharata, Mahabharata is the name of the war, the Great War. In fact, they use that expression for World War I, right? The Great War. In fact, for World War I and World War II, Great War. We use that word great as an adjective for also for something that's big, but also for something that's good. Anything good about these great wars? The only thing good is that the totalitarian and fascist regimes were defeated. That's good. But the consequences of those wars were horrible. So the term Maha in Mahabharata means great, not good. Nowhere in the Mahabharata, and I certainly haven't studied the whole Mahabharata, 84,000 verses. But I figured over the years I've studied many thousands of verses. And you know that we taught that Vedantic teachings from the Mahabharata. That was 2,000 verses right there. In preparing for that class, I probably read closer to 10,000 verses. But 10,000 verses is like 1/8 of the Mahabharata, and that's a maximum I could read. Here's the point. I never read a single verse, and I don't believe there's a single verse in the entire scripture that legitimately praises war. War is not praised in the Mahabharata. And that Stri Parva that Avijit refers to talks about the horrors of war. So the war is presented in context. The terrible things leading up to the war and the terrible actions done during the war and the horrible consequences after the war. The Mahabharata is brutally honest in describing each one of those. The horrible things, the abuse of the Pandavas by the Kauravas is very dramatically demonstrated in the lead up to the war. The horrors of the war itself are the description of the war is as gory as you can imagine. It's bloody. And then the consequences of the war, as we see in the Stri Parva, the women mourning the loss of their loved ones. So the consequences are shown. Every part of the Mahabharata is a brutally honest description of how terrible wars are, both the lead up, the act of the war, and what follows the war. Nowhere is war condoned or praised. Maybe one. We'll take just a few more. Any questions here? Not today. Okay. So let's just finish with 2 more questions here. This is a question from Michael. Michael had actually asked in last week's satsang about the problem of lack of objectivity. We talked about pratibhasika satta is a reality that we create. We project with our minds so many wrong concepts of the world. In fact, staying with our example of World War II, the German people in the Nazi regime created this idea of the master race. This master race was their mental creation, their idea. They created that idea, and their devotion to that idea led to 7 million executions. And how many dead? If 7 million were executed, I don't recall. I like to remember these numbers, but I don't. It was more than tens of millions. It might have been 100 million people, civilian soldiers, through the whole course of the war. The numbers are hard to grasp. So all of this horror is due to, look at this. The horror of World War II was due to an idea. Wow! An idea. And the devotion to that idea, the idea of the master race. You think ideas are just ideas? Wow. So this is what Michael's talking about. How does Vedanta suggest we deal with these ideas? His words are, how does Vedanta suggest we see through them, reduce them, and manage them, and not buy into these projections? Projection meaning what I called ideas. Vedanta doesn't treat it specifically. This is more of a social problem and a psychological problem. So Vedanta doesn't directly address some, but terrible problems, not just for societies, but for individuals as well. Your own, if there's someone you really dislike, that's an idea. And it's an idea that makes you miserable and makes the other person miserable. So it's a mini version of this war. It's an idea with really nasty consequences. Your idea of hating someone, the Nazi idea of the master race, these are ideas which are harmful, but these are ideas which are not treated, these are problems which are not treated directly by Vedanta, but rather they're social problems, psychological problems, which are handled elsewhere. One more question, and we'll conclude. This question comes from Stuart, who lives in Harrison, New York. I understand that thoughts and ahankara are inert and therefore not conscious. That's not the essence of the question, but let me point out that thoughts and ahankara exist in consciousness. We could say that the forms are inert, but the content of every thought is consciousness. So to say they're inert is maybe an oversimplification, but we'll say that the form of the ideas are not, they're objects, mental objects. That safer way is to call them mental objects. If you call them inert, it's like physical things. Mental objects are not the same as physical objects, right? Physical objects are made of stuff. Mental objects are made of, at one point we can say they're made of subtle stuff, and in that way we can, as Stuart says, we can call them subtle. But a more nuanced understanding of mental objects, vrittis, thoughts, is to say they're made of consciousness. So just to add a little dimension to the question here. It's also the case that these thoughts express raga and dvesha by saying, I like such and such a person, or I hate such and such a person. How can thoughts, here's this question, how can thoughts credibly make such pronouncements? I like such a person, I dislike such a person, when thoughts themselves can't experience any of the things they're commenting on. Thoughts can't experience things. And maybe this is why to say that thoughts are inert is an oversimplification. So it's not so black and white, thoughts belong to you. You as a jiva, you as an individual person, you have thoughts, and some of those thoughts are, I like this person and I don't like that person. These conclusions are conclusions made not by thoughts, and Stewart is right, thoughts can't make conclusions. But the conclusion, I like this person, I don't like that person, these conclusions are not made by the thoughts themselves. These thoughts are made by jiva, the individual person. And the individual person is not an inert object. The individual person is a combination of inert stuff, physical stuff, non-physical stuff, but in the presence of consciousness. So the jiva, the individual person, is not pure consciousness. The jiva, the individual person, is not an inert object. The jiva, the individual person, is the result of the combination of consciousness with body, mind, and senses. It's that jiva that has ideas like, I like that person, I don't like that person. It's that jiva who has ideas like master race. And some of these ideas can be really consequential. These ideas are not born of thoughts. These ideas are, nor are the ideas born of consciousness. And I think this is the essence of Stewart's question. Where do ideas, and we'll end with this observation. It's interesting. Where do thoughts come from? Does consciousness produce thoughts? Consciousness doesn't do anything. Based on our very deep studies of Advaita Vedanta, consciousness just is. It's the essence of who you are. It doesn't do anything. In Sanskrit, akarta, a non-agent of action. So consciousness doesn't produce thoughts. Does your brain produce thoughts? It'll come to mind in just a moment. Does your brain produce thoughts? Your brain produces electrical activities that travels from one neuron to another. So your brain doesn't produce thoughts. Does your mind produce thoughts? Your mind is thoughts. Mind, what do we mean by mind? What do we mean by mind? Mind, try this. Mind minus thoughts equals what? Mind is thoughts. Doesn't make sense to say mind creates thoughts because mind is thoughts. So what seems to be a simple question is not so simple. Where do these thoughts come from? They don't come from consciousness. They don't come from brain. They don't come from mind. But you experience them all the time. So you can't deny their existence. So we're left with a dilemma. How to explain the relationship between consciousness, a non-physical reality, and brain and mind, a worldly reality. They have to combine to create thoughts. So how does that happen? By the way, to explain how it happens, neuroscientists have been going on for decades. Philosophers have been going on for centuries. And even in Advaita Vedanta, we have different prakriyas, methods of explaining. We have something called avachedavada, something called pratibimbavada, which I'm not going to explain at all right now. These are theories to explain how consciousness and world interact. And they're theories because consciousness and world don't really interact. This is a conundrum. It is a question that has no superficial answer. Yet, it is part of our experience. We understand our experience and we can explain our experience in various ways. So, the question of where do thoughts come from seems like such an obvious question. But if you're very thoughtful about it, it has to be one of the most mind-breaking questions possible. And no easy answer to that, even in Advaita Vedanta. Now, like I said, I don't want to get into the details of avachedavada, pratibimbavada, abhasavada. It's complicated. And we need, one thing we know for sure, thoughts get produced all the time. No one has any questions about it. And we also know that these thoughts can make us suffer. Just a final comment here. Vedanta doesn't need to explain how thoughts are produced. Vedanta only needs to explain how to ensure that those thoughts don't make you suffer. How thoughts are produced is a good topic for neuroscience. It's a good topic for philosophers. But Vedanta is not neuroscience. Vedanta is not a philosophy. Vedanta is a solution to the problem of suffering. So the point here, and the last point, is that Vedanta need not explain how thoughts are produced. It does. It has several different explanations for how thoughts are produced. But Vedanta need not insist that one of these explanations are true and the others are false. These are just modes of explanation. The job of Vedanta is not to explain how thoughts are produced. The job, if we can call it a job, is to find a means so that those thoughts do not make you suffer. That's what Vedanta is about. And with that, we'll conclude our satsang. Thank you for joining us online. Thank you to all of you for joining us here. And we'll conclude with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asatu Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om.